Listen.
Who are you cosplaying as?
Doctor Strange.
So Fox Marvel once said that they were going to come out with the first big horror comic movie with New Mutants. And honestly, the only scary thing about that movie was worrying if it was ever going to get released. And honestly, it still feels like it hasn't. But now that Disney swallowed them up, they've decided to give their little take on horror, for Fox's sake. And they got really lucky with getting Sam Raimi back to direct a superhero movie. Now, this is going to be the spoiler-free review, or else Feige snaps his fingers and I'm gone. But I thought overall it was pretty decent. It's not going to be the one to convert people who aren't already on the MCU wagon, because the dialogue isn't that great. The CG looks sketchy at times. It's one of those that ends and it feels like you just saw a teaser for the real movie that's coming up next. But for the MCU fans, that's kind of like what they want, It actually covers the new angle and where they're going to be taking things, which I think is pretty pivotal. The Easter eggs are pretty fun. The cameos are great. And the fighting is actually fantastic, considering that they're leaning more towards the Invincible style than their usual skerfuffles. But I do think people are going to be split on one thing. And that's the fact that if you're looking at this as a Doctor Strange movie, it's all right. But as a Wanda movie is where it really stands out. Let me explain.
What do you know about the multiverse?
Now, the main things you need to know before going in, your must-watches, I would say, are a couple of episodes from the What If series, because they kind of serve as primers to the multiverse. Obviously, rewatching Doctor Strange 1, even though I will say that they don't really pick up a lot of the loose threads from that movie, and even the stuff that you may not know, just watching the beginning of this movie, I feel like you could piece them together. The essential one is actually WandaVision, because it's kind of crazy to think that movie theater tickets now cost a streaming subscription as well, but it really is more of a sequel to her than it is for him. She's still the one who's dealing with the fallout of her family. That one time she terrorized that town. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange is dealing with having to be the only goatee left in this franchise. Wong continues to be the best in the Sanctum. It was cool to see a lot of the other warriors also step up to the plate. But the newcomer who we have is America Chavez, who's an alien from another dimension, but is able to connect with the youth here on Earth because that's where Marvel's selling tickets. She ends up being Strange's sidekick since her power is to Patrick Star herself across the multiverses, and it leads to some pretty cool sequences. I'm still more of a fan of the inverse style that they were going in the first movie, but it was cool to see that even a lot of the shots that they released, they were still able to sneak some frames in there. And I know that they're really pushing 3D on this one, because even for the IMAX showings, you cannot get a ticket without them forcing the glasses on you.
I don't even want to know!
In my opinion, I just think they need better writers. They got the writer from Loki, which is cool. I know they want to keep it consistent, but you're dealing with some of the craziest concepts in this universe, and it still feels pretty lame. Like, not only do they refuse to go crazier, because whenever they do, they fire those directors, but in the meantime of not getting there, you're also kind of making a lot of your characters' problems seem trivial, because, you have all these universes that now exist. It's funny because it's one of those story tropes that just leads to more questions, and once those are answered, it just creates 5 more. But to Feige, that just means more content. Honestly, every other studio must be marveling at how it's the biggest cop-out in order to keep recycling characters in perpetuity. But I am glad that the MCU is finally getting directors to direct. Obviously, it's still Marvel, and they're going to be doing their Marvel thing. They're going to meddle before you ever get an Evil Dead.
It's very much a Sam Raimi film, so if you're into Sam's work, you'll love it. His take on horror, as well as much as this certification can sort of allow it.
But I was surprised to see it be a decent split for Raimi, because obviously he's got to do all the studio stuff. He's got to put in all the cosmic jumping and lore building. But when he's able to be in his creepy bag and he brings all those elements in, man, I loved one portion of this movie way more than the other. Like, there's a scene that plays out like an inverse Darkness Falls that I thought was incredible. It's almost like the MCU doing their version of La Llorona. Fantastic. And I know that some people are worried that it may be too spooky, too creepy for the kids. Man, y'all already brought these kids to see their heroes die right in front of them. Who cares? Danny Elfman's score was also pretty dope, and it's cool to see them reunite after their iconic work in Spider-Man 2, the greatest superhero movie of all time. And the dude also wrote, an action sequence in this movie, so it's kind of insane that, the man just did Coachella, and now he's rocking out with these superheroes in the multiverse. The gory effects were also awesome. They look like some of the stuff at the Met Gala this year, but the real magic comes in what they did with those trailers, because I'm telling you, they played with that narrative more than Peter did in No Way Home.
Prove it.
Overall, this finally feels like the real start to the next phase in the MCU, which, makes it essential for the fans to consume. Again, I just wish that the writing wasn't as still in between all of the Wanda scenes, and that they answered more of the cliffhangers that were left in Doctor Strange 1, considering this is Doctor Strange 2. But overall, they're always a fun time. It just feels more and more like you're watching an episode, though, that's just on the big screen, and it feels more like an appetizer for something bigger that's always on the horizon. And while you can get full-off appetizers, is still not an entree. Thank you all for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section, your theories, thoughts. Obviously, be careful if you haven't seen the movie yet. This is the spoiler-free review, and I will have a full LME coming up. And I am thinking of catching it again. We were able to catch it in Dolby, but considering Sam's craftsmanship, I do want to catch it in that 3D IMAX if that's the way he intended it.
Well, the technology's gotten a lot easier. We no longer, like in the first Spider-Man movie, had to make the tools to make the tools.
It's also just crazy to think that Feige was an assistant back in the day with them for Spider-Man 1. He was probably just like writing notes in the background, coming up with the multiverse and all of the storylines that he has going on now, just waiting for them to see. And this was back when Sam Raimi was directing Spider-Man 1 and 2. And, he actually gave a shout out to Doctor Strange, and now he's here.
Doctor Strange.
That's pretty good. But it's taken.
So I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, what you're looking forward to, where you're hoping they take it, where this one ranks, I guess, in the entire MCU. We're almost 30 in. But until next time, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, just like the other multiverse you did.